The old man slept by the fire and nobody could agree on whether to wake him. I came down at first light. 9 people stood around him in a loose ring, none of them close. He lay flat on his back on the bare rock. The filthy blanket was over him. Both rag-wrapped hands were folded on his chest. He was snoring like a saw going through wet timber. Jory was crouched a yard from the old man's head with his elbows on his knees, entirely delighted with him. "He has been doing that for 2 hours," he said. 2 solid hours. I have slept in a barracks with 40 men in it and I have never heard anything like it. It is magnificent. I would pay money. Ren said. He walked out of Stonegate in the dark. Ren had not come any closer than she had to. On his own, 2 days across open ash at night with nothing on him. Nobody does that, not old men, not young ones either. Jory said he did it though. That is my point, Jory. She stood further back than the rest of them, arms folded, weight on one hip. She had not stopped watching him since I came out. I sent everybody to work and sat down on the step. He woke an hour later all at once, the way a soldier does. One moment he was snoring. The next his eyes were open and clear and looking straight at me. There was nothing in between. "Food," he said, as though we were halfway through a conversation, and I had been slow answering. "Good morning to you as well." Noel said food first, then a place at that fire that is mine and stays mine. Then we can talk and not one word before it. He looked at me the way a man looks at a door he expects to find locked. Noel said, I have walked 2 days to say that. Do not make me say it twice. So I fed him. Ivy gave him the same barley everybody else got. He ate it slowly, the way a man eats who has learned to make a little last. He did not thank her either. Then he stood up. He put the blanket down on the rock. He looked around my camp for a while. He looked at the ditch. He looked at the gate. He looked at the cistern with the bucket beside it. He looked at Harl already working under the forge canvas, and at 91 people going about the morning, and at the 4 cairns under the east face. Noel said, How long have you had this? 3 weeks tomorrow. He put his tongue in his cheek and went on looking at the gate a while longer. He said that was the whole review. Right, he said, and knocked the barley dust off his hands. Noel said, Go and fetch your sword and come at me. I want to explain what I thought in that moment. I have been wrong in my life, rarely that comprehensively. I thought, he is 70-something years old. He weighs about as much as a wet coat. He has lived in an alley for 18 years. Both his hands are wrapped in rag. I thought, I will have to be careful not to break him. I will hurt you. Yes, he said, and it was the first time I had seen him look pleased about anything at all. Noel said that would make a very nice change. Come on then, I am not standing here all morning. He did not pick anything up. He stood on the open rock in front of the tower, arms loose at his sides. His feet were not even set properly. About 30 people stopped working to watch, and I should have taken that as a warning. I went at him properly, not fast and not to hurt him. A clean straight thrust at the shoulder, the sort of thing you use on a boy in a yard to make him move. I do not know what happened. I have gone over it with Das since slowly on paper. I still do not entirely know. What I can tell you is this. The sword went out, then the sword was not in my hand. Then the flat of it was resting against the side of my neck and the old man was standing where my right shoulder had been. It took about 2 seconds. Nobody laughed. That is what I remember. 30 people watched their lord taken apart by a beggar and not one of them made a sound. It had not been funny. It had been like watching a door close. He handed the sword back, grip first. Noel said again. The second time I meant it. I came in the way I came in at the ford. Everything I had and no courtesy in it. It took slightly longer. I want that on the record. It took perhaps 3 seconds. At the end of it, I was face down on the rock with my own arm folded up behind me and a knee in the middle of my back. I never once saw him move fast. Noel said again. The third time I did not attack at all. I stood off and circled and waited for him to come to me. That is what Das taught me to do against a better man. He waited too. He waited about 4 minutes. I have never in my life felt so completely looked at. He was not studying my guard. He was reading me the way I read a stable yard, and there was nothing I could do to stop him. Then he sighed. He stepped in. He took the sword off me a third time. That one I felt coming, and I could do nothing at all about it, which was worse. "Right," he said. "Sit down before you fall down." I sat down on the rock. My hands were shaking. I was not sure why, because I had not burned a drop of aura in any of the three. Noel said, "Now listen. I am going to say the useful part once." He crouched in front of me. His knees cracked like breaking sticks. It did not slow him down at all. Noel said, "Your hands are the best I have seen on a boy your age. Hear that properly, because I will not say it twice, and in a minute you are going to think I have been telling you that you are bad. You took my sword off me 3 times in front of 30 people." Noel said, "I have taken swords off better men than you are ever likely to meet. It is what I am for." He waved the whole thing away like a fly at a window. Noel said, "Whoever taught you knew exactly what he was about. Your feet are right. Your elbow is right. You waste nothing and you decorate nothing. That is not your problem." "Then what is my problem?" Noel said, "You were taught to spend." He held up one rag-wrapped hand and turned it over. Noel said, "Somebody sat you in a barn with a candle. He taught you to light the blade for the cut and put it out between cuts." "Yes." "Yes." Noel said, "A clever man, whoever he was. That is the right way to teach a boy with a small reserve, and it will keep him alive." He shrugged one thin shoulder. Noel said, "It is also a cage. You have been standing quietly inside it for 8 years and calling it good sense." "It is not a cage, it is arithmetic. I have 90 seconds." Noel said, 140, since the ford. I did not answer that. 4 people on that rock knew it. He was not one of them. Noel said, "You have 140 seconds if you keep pouring it out through the edge of a sword. Do you know what I have?" He looked at me with those perfectly clear eyes. Noel said, "I have not lit a blade in 18 years. Not once. And I took your sword off you 3 times this morning without breathing hard." "How?" Noel said, "Because spending is not the only thing you can do with it. It is only the thing anybody bothers to teach. It is easy, and it works, and it makes a great many adequate knights." He stood up slowly. This time the age showed. Noel said, "Holding is harder. It takes years. And it is the whole difference between a man who counts seconds and a man who does not have to." I sat there and thought about the ford, about a door closing behind my ribs with 4 men still on their feet. "Teach me." Noel said, "I am going to. That is why I walked here." Das came across the rock then. He had stood at the top of the ramp through the whole thing and had not said one word. That was not like him. The two of them looked at each other for a while. I read that look completely wrong at the time. I thought it was 2 old men measuring each other the way old men do. It was not. Das already knew something. Not all of it and not the name. But he had watched the second disarm, and he had gone through every possibility, and he had come out the far side with a very short list. "You were army." Noel said, "Everybody was army once. It was that sort of century." "Not like that they were not. I have been 40 years in the field, and I have never watched a man take a blade off anybody the way you did that." Noel said no. Noel agreed pleasantly. "I do not suppose you have." And he went to get more barley. Das watched him go. Then he sat down on the step beside me and said nothing for a minute. "Say it." "I have got nothing to say. That is the trouble." He rubbed his bad hip. Das said, I can name every man in the East who could have done that to you this morning. There are 4 of them. I have met 3, and he is not any of the 3. And the 4th? Das looked at the fire for a moment before he answered me. The 4th is a sovereign of the realm, and he has been dead for 18 years. He got up off the step. Das said, and I am not going to be the old fool who says a thing like that out loud on a rock. Then what do I do? Das said, watch him. That is all I am asking, not because I think he means you harm, because I do not. He looked over at the fire, where the old man was scraping out a bowl. Das said, watch him because there is something he is not telling you. A man does not live 18 years in an alley for no reason, and men like that never have small ones. I found Noel at the fire an hour later. He was eating a second bowl he had not asked permission for. What do you want for it, for the teaching? He thought about that for a long time, long enough that I nearly asked him again. Noel said, I will tell you when you can afford it. That is not an answer, and you know it is not. Noel said no. It is a debt with no figure written on it, which is the worst kind there is. He went back to his barley without the least sign of embarrassment. Noel said, and you are going to agree to it anyway. You have 91 people on a rock and 11 days of food, and I am the best thing that has walked up that ramp since you found the water. He was right about all of it, including the 11 days, and I had not told him that part. We opened every barrel on the rock that morning and counted what was in it. I made sure it was done where people could see. That was Das. I wanted it done quietly in the cellar, and he would not have it. If they hear a number out of your mouth, they will believe half of it. He said, if they stand and watch you count it, they will believe every word. And when they panic, Das said, they are going to hear a number today whether you give them one or not. He rapped his knuckles on the barrel head twice, the way he does when he thinks I am being slow. Das said, Ivy has already counted. Ivy counts every morning of her life. What do you imagine she talks about while she is stirring a pot for 90 people? So we counted in the open on the tower step, and the whole camp found reasons to walk past. 11 sacks of flour, 4 barrels of salt pork out of 6, 2 of beans, most of a barrel of salt, a little oil, and Ivy's own 2 pans of dried apple which she had carried here on her back and had not mentioned to anybody. 91 people. Ivy did the arithmetic faster than I did, on her fingers, without appearing to think about it. 11 days. She said, 12 if I water the porridge and nobody does a stroke of work. They are all doing a great deal of work, so it is 11. 11 then. Ivy said 11, and that is if not one more soul comes up that ramp between now and the last of it. She wiped her hands down her apron and looked at me steadily, because she knew exactly what she was about to hand me. Ivy said 4 came up yesterday, my lord, a man, his wife, and 2 little ones. I fed them. That was the part I had not properly understood until she said it out loud. Every person who arrived was a good thing. Every person who arrived was another mouth against the same 11 days. The number that was making Blackstone worth anything was the same number that was going to starve it. And there was no version of the problem where I turned people away. Turning people away is what the last 3 men who held this ground did, and none of them lasted a year. I cut the ration that morning. I did it myself, standing on a barrel, and I did not dress it up. I told them what was in the store. They were going to know by supper anyway. I told them the ration was going down by 1/5 from that meal. I told them I was riding to Stonegate with 60 gold and I expected to come back with food. Then I had Ivy serve me first in front of everybody and made her give me the smallest bowl on the board. That was not a gesture. I want to be honest about it. It was arithmetic again. A man who eats less than his people can ask them to eat less. A man who eats the same as them can ask for nothing at all. Das taught me that when I was 14 in a stable over a sack of oats. It held for about 4 hours. The trouble started at the ditch in the afternoon over a short measure of water. Here is what actually happened. The version that went round the camp by nightfall had 3 different endings. Cades 14 were digging out the last of the ditch face. The Stonegate carters were carrying spoil. At the midday break, one of the carters served the water and the diggers got the short end of the barrel. That happens. On any other day it is nothing. That day, one of Cade's men said something about being fed last by people who had been paid to shoot at him a fortnight ago. Which was fair. That is the thing about it. It was completely fair. It was also the worst sentence anybody could have said on that rock. Inside a minute there were 9 men on their feet in the bottom of a ditch, and 2 of them had knives half out of their belts. I got down there at a run. Jory was 2 paces behind me. I did not draw. I want that clear because Jory drew. I put my hand flat on his chest and pushed him back, and he has never let me forget it. What I did was worse than drawing, and I knew it while I was doing it. I walked into the middle of 9 angry men. I took the loudest carter by the front of his coat and put him into the ditch wall hard enough to empty his lungs. Then I turned round and caught the wrist of the loudest of Cade's men, the one with the knife out, and bent it until the knife dropped. I held him there and let it hurt. Then I said the only thing I had. There are 11 days of food on this rock. Nobody moved. Somewhere behind me, a shovel slid down an earth bank and nobody went after it. If you want to spend one of those days fighting each other in a hole, then go on and spend it. I will bury whoever loses. I will feed whoever wins for 10 more days, and after that he can starve alongside the rest of us. Still nobody said anything at all. From tomorrow the water goes down the line from the far end. Diggers first, then the carriers, then me last. Whoever is served last today is served first tomorrow, and Ivy keeps the list. Argue with her about it, not with me. It was not a speech, it was a rota. But a rota is a thing a man can check, and a speech is not. They went back to work. I was shaking again by the time I got up the ramp. I made sure I was behind the tower before anybody saw it. That was well handled, he said from behind me. Das said, and badly done. Of course he had followed me. He has followed me round a corner at the worst possible moment since I was 9 years old. Das said, you put a grown man into a wall in front of 40 people, my lord. It stopped, though. Das said it did. He leaned his shoulder against the stonework and let me get my breath. Das said, and now every one of them knows that you will do it, which is worth a good deal. And every one of them knows that you had to, which costs you a good deal. Both of those things happened in the same minute. So which was it in the end? Das said, on the day you can tell me which without stopping to think, you will be a lord. He pushed himself off the wall. Das said, it is not today. There is one more thing about that afternoon, and I did not see it at all. There was a man in that ditch called Lam. He was one of Cade's 14, about 30. Quiet, good with his hands, and one of the 3 Das had picked out inside a week as better than anybody I hired in Stonegate. He was not the one with the knife. He was not the one who said the thing about being fed last. He did not shout, and he did not push, and he did not take a side. He stood at the back of the ditch with a mattock in his hands, and he watched the whole thing. He watched me put a man into a wall. He watched me bend another man's wrist. He watched 40 people decide in about 90 seconds exactly what kind of lord I was. Then he went back to digging. I noticed him. That is the part that eats at me. I noticed him because he was the only man down there who had not moved, and I thought, that one is steady. I should give him something to hold. 9 days later he opened my gate in the dark. That evening I sat with Das and Ivy and Pip and worked out what I was going to Stonegate to buy. Grain first, salt pork, oil, 4 more oxen if anybody would sell them because the goblins had taken 2 and we were carrying everything on the 4 that brought us out. Pip listened to all of it with his chin on his fists and said nothing. For Pip, that meant he was working. How much have you actually got? 61 gold. 61. He sat up straight. You could buy all of that twice over and still have change for a horse. That is not a problem. That is the opposite of a problem. Then he frowned at the fire, and the frown stayed there. Pip said, "It is not the buying that worries me." "Then what worries you?" Pip said, "Getting it here, my lord." I did not think about that sentence again for 2 days. By then it had cost me an ox and very nearly a man. I rode into Stonegate with 60 gold, Pip, Wren, and 4 men, and I was refused 4 times before noon. Nobody was rude. I want to be accurate about that because rude would have been easier. Rude I could have argued with. The first was the grain factor on the market row. He had 11 tons of barley in a stone store with a good roof on it, and I stood in front of him with gold in my hand. "I am sold out, my lord." "Your door is standing open, and I can see 11 tons of it from where I am." "Sold, my lord, not shifted. They are a different thing, and you know they are." He would not meet my eye, and he was not enjoying himself in the least. Factor said, "I hope you find some elsewhere. I mean that." The second was the salt merchant, who was suddenly unwell. The third was a woman who dealt in oil and dried fish, and who told me plainly that she would sell me anything I liked, as much as I liked, at a fair price. Delivered where, though? The Anvil, 2 days east on the Ash Road. Then no, my lord, and I am sorry for it. I will pay the carriage. Name it and I will pay double. I know you would. That is what makes it a shame. She turned back to her barrels and got on with her work. Merchant said, "It is not the money and it is not your name either, whatever you have been told. Go down to the cart yards and ask a driver. Somebody down there will tell you, and it will not be me." The fourth was the ox dealer, and he laughed at me, which at least felt honest. By midday I had spent nothing and learned nothing, and I was standing in the middle of a market with 60 gold in a purse under my coat, which is a strange sort of poor. Pip found me there. He had been gone since dawn. I had not sent him anywhere. He had simply vanished the way he did, and he came back through the crowd at a trot with his coat flapping and his face lit up. "It is not you," he said before he had properly got his breath. "It has felt a great deal like me all morning." Pip said, "No, listen. I went down the yards and I sat with the carters, not the masters. The masters will tell you anything. The men who actually walk beside the wheels." He was talking so fast that I had to put a hand on his shoulder and slow him down twice. Pip said, "Not one of them will take a team east. Not for you, not for the Count, not for anybody living. It has nothing to do with your name at all." "Then why?" Pip said, 11 beasts in 2 years. I looked at him. 11 draft animals gone off that road in 2 years. Every one of them at night, and every one of them between the last mile of good ground and the broken bridge. He held up one finger, because he had been saving the good part all the way through the market. Pip said, "And here is the thing, my lord. They never find the carts smashed. They find them standing in the road, upright, with the harness still buckled and cut clean through, and no beast anywhere, and no blood worth speaking of." "And the drivers?" Pip said, "Every single one of them fine. Every one. They walked home." That is the detail that made my neck go cold, standing in a market at noon. Something out there had taken 11 animals in 2 years and had not once taken a man. That is not luck. That is a preference. They think the road is cursed. He said, "That is the whole of it in the yard. Cursed road. Do not take a team past the bridge, and do not stand about arguing with a man who tells you so. It is not cursed." Pip said, "I know that, and you know that, and it makes no odds to any of them." He shrugged, and for a moment he looked much older than 14. Pip said, "They have got families." So that was the real answer, and it had been sitting in a carter's yard for 2 years waiting for somebody to ask a 14-year-old to go and listen. I was still turning it over when I went down the lane behind the tannery to fetch the horses, and that is where Grist was waiting. There were 6 of them. The one in front was a heavy man of about 50 in a good coat, with gray in his beard and a soldier's way of standing. He had his thumbs in his belt, and he was not in any hurry. "You will be the bastard, then." "I will be the lord of the anvil." "You will be the bastard who took my nephew's arm off at the elbow," he said, in the tone of a man correcting a clerk. Grist said, "And there is nothing in that charter of yours that changes it." There it was. I had known Cade had family. I had not thought about what family means. It means somebody comes and finds you in a lane. Grist said he cannot hold a cup. Did anybody tell you that part? He is 24 years old and his mother has to cut his meat for him. He came up my ramp with 30 men to take my land off me. Grist said I know exactly what he did. He is a fool, he has always been a fool, and I have told him so to his face. Nothing whatever moved in the man's face while he said it. Grist said, and none of that has the smallest thing to do with what is about to happen in this lane. Wren was 40 yards back with the horses. Pip was somewhere behind me. My 4 men were at the market, 6 of them, 1 of me. And here is the part that mattered, and Grist knew it before I did. There is a law in Stonegate about steel. A charter holder who draws a blade inside the count's walls loses his charter. Not a fine, not a night in a cell. The charter. Talbot had it read out on the office steps twice a year, and he had taken 2 charters off men in 9 years for exactly that. Grist and his 5 were not charter holders. They were a lord's retainers, and the worst they faced was a beating and a fine. He could draw, I could not. "Now," he said and stepped forward. I did 3 things in the next 2 seconds, and only one of them was clever. The first was to shout loudly for Wren to stay where she was. If she put an arrow into a man in that lane, it would be the same as my own hand. The second was to put my back to the tannery wall, because 6 men in a lane can only reach you 2 at a time if you make them. The third was to pick up a length of chain off a hook by the door, which was hanging there for hides, and which is not a blade. The fight took about a minute and a half, and it was the ugliest thing I have ever done. I am not going to pretend it was elegant. There was no aura in it. I did not light anything, because a lit blade is a drawn blade in the eyes of any witness, and I had 6 of them. I hit the first man across the forearm with the chain and heard something go. I put the second one into a stack of hides and his head into the wall behind them. The third got a hand on my collar, and I let him have it and went in under his arm and took his legs out with my boot. The fourth was better. He got 2 good ones into my ribs before I got the chain around his wrist and pulled him off his feet. The 5th ran. I want that recorded because he was the sensible one. Then it was Grist, and Grist had drawn his sword, and I had a length of chain and a wall behind me. He was good. Better than his men and better than Cade. Steel rank and about 30 years of it. He came in straight and fast, and I did the only thing available, which was to let the chain take the blade and wrap it, and then get inside the length of the sword where a sword is no use at all. I hit him 3 times in the body with my left hand and once in the throat with the edge of the chain, and he went down on 1 knee in the muck of the lane and stayed there. I could have finished it. He knew that too. I stepped back instead, and I put the chain on the ground where everybody could see me put it down. That is when I noticed the street. There were perhaps 20 people at the mouth of that lane, and standing at the front of them in a plain dark coat, with his thumbs in his belt in almost exactly the way Grist had been standing, was Count Talbot. I do not know how long he had been there. Long enough. He had not moved, and he had not spoken, and he had let the whole of it happen. His men took Grist's 5 away. Somebody helped Grist up. Talbot came down the lane and looked at me for a while. My ribs were going, and I was bleeding from somewhere above the eye, and I had not drawn my sword. "You kept your charter?" "Yes, my lord." 6 men came down a lane at you, and somewhere in the 2 seconds before the first of them reached you, you remembered a clause of town law and did the arithmetic on it. I said nothing to that. He was not congratulating me, and I could hear it perfectly clearly. Talbot said, "That is the thing about you that frightens me, boy." Then he turned round and went back up the street, and he did not offer me a single thing. Not a carter, not a sack of grain, not a word to a merchant. I rode out of Stonegate at 3 in the afternoon with 60 gold, no food, no oxen, and a cut over my eye. And one fact, 11 beasts in 2 years. No men. Harness cut, carts left standing. I asked the window a question on the ride home, and it had never occurred to me to try. That is the stupid part. I had carried the thing for 9 weeks. In all that time it had spoken when it wanted and gone quiet when it wanted, and I had learned to wait on it the way you wait on weather. It gave me a card about a maid who had not slept. It gave me a card about a man who had killed more than anyone in Stonegate. It never once told me a thing because I wanted it told. So I had stopped asking. You stop asking a door that does not open. That afternoon I was 3 hours out of Stonegate with a cut over my eye and my ribs hurting where the fourth man had got me. Pip was riding beside me talking about carters. I was not listening to him properly. I was thinking, 11 animals in 2 years and not one man. And I thought it hard, the way you think at somebody across a room. What takes them? I said it out loud. Pip stopped talking and looked at me. The window opened. Focus accepted subject, the road east before the broken bridge. Time required 2 days. I read that twice. Then I read the line underneath it, which was smaller and which was the whole of my next fortnight. While focused, nothing else will be shown. I sat on that horse in the middle of the ash road and understood what I had been offered. 2 days of answers about one thing, and 2 days of nothing about anything else. No cards on faces, no cards on ground, no small blue rectangle telling me a man was lying while he stood in front of me lying, blind on purpose, for 2 days. Pip said, "What is the matter with you?" He had gone up in his stirrups to look at my face. Pip said, "You have gone the color of a dead fish." "Nothing is the matter, ride." I said yes to it before we reached the next cairn. I want to be honest about why, because I have had a long time to think about it since. It was not brave. I had 91 people and 10 days of food and a road that nobody would carry it down. There was no clever third answer. There was one door in the wall and the price on it was 2 days of being an ordinary man. I thought, what can happen in 2 days? Das did not like it. I told him that night on the tower step. He listened all the way through without interrupting, which is how I know he was angry. "So for 2 days, you cannot see anything." "I can see everything that you can see." "Yes, my lord, that is precisely what I said." He let it sit for a moment. Das said, "You have 14 men on this rock who were putting arrows into us 3 weeks ago. You have 40 strangers whose names you learned last Tuesday. You have a beggar sitting at your fire who took your sword off you 3 times before breakfast." He counted none of it on his fingers. He did not need to. Das said, "And you propose to walk about among them for 2 days with your eyes shut. And 10 days of food." Das said, "Yes. That is the argument, and it is a good one, and if you asked me, I would probably do the same." He got up off the step and stood over me. Das said, "I am telling you it has a price so that you hear it once from a man, and not only from a window." He was right, I did it anyway. 9 days later, a man opened my gate in the dark. We rode out to look at the road in the morning. I took Ren, Jory, 4 men and 2 oxen with an empty cart because I wanted to see the ground the way a carter sees it. Das stayed on the rock. That was deliberate. If something happened to me out there, Blackstone still had a commander. We went in full daylight. That was the whole of my thinking, and I was pleased with it at the time. 11 animals, all at night. So we go by day. The road east out of Stonegate is good for 11 miles. It is old crown work, laid stone under the ash, and you can hear the difference under a hoof. Then the good ground stops. There is a place where the stone runs out and the ash takes over, and past it the country changes. It goes soft and gray and very slightly wrong. The ash is deeper there, up to a horse's fetlock, and it moves when the wind comes. A mile and a half further on is the bridge, which is not a bridge. It is 2 stone abutments and a gap. 40 feet down there is a dry channel with nothing in it. Wren got off her horse before we reached the soft ground. She walked the last quarter-mile leading it, with her head down, and I let her. She was doing the thing she is better at than anybody I know. "There is no bird." Jory said, "There is no bird anywhere out here, Wren. That is rather the point of the place." There were birds 4 miles back, 3 of them on the cairn, and I watched them go up when we passed. There are none now, and there have been none for half an hour. She went down on her heels and pushed 2 fingers into the gray. Wren said, "And this ground has been turned over." "Turned over by what?" Wren said, "By something underneath it." That is when I should have turned the cart around. I have gone over it since. Everything I needed was in that sentence, and I wanted to see the bridge. We went another 600 yards. The oxen knew before we did. They stopped, both of them at once in the middle of the road, and nothing on earth was going to move them. "That is not stubborn," he said quietly, which is not a thing Jory does. "I grew up round oxen. I have been kicked the length of a barn by stubborn. That animal is frightened." I gave the order to turn the cart. We got it half round. The ground under the lead ox opened. I have tried to describe this since, and I always get it wrong because people hear the word open and picture a hole. It was not a hole. The ash simply stopped being ground. It went down in a circle about the width of a cart all at once with a sound like a sack emptying. The ox went to its shoulders in a heartbeat. Then it was not there. 900 pounds of animal gone straight down. The sound it made lasted about a second and a half and then stopped. A man called Quinn had the lead rein wrapped round his forearm. He had done it that morning without thinking, the way every carter in the world does it. It took him off his feet. It took him into the ash face first. Then it started dragging him, 20 feet. I have paced it since. 20 feet, and it took perhaps 3 seconds, and in those 3 seconds I did nothing at all. I want that in this account. I stood in the road with my hand on my sword, and I did not move because there was nothing in front of me to hit. Jory moved. He went past me at a dead run, and he did not draw his sword either. He had his belt knife out before he got there. He landed on his knees in the ash beside Quinn, got the blade under the rein where it was cutting into the man's arm, and sawed. The rein went. Quinn came loose. The rest of it went on down. Wren put 3 arrows into the ash in 8 seconds. Every one into open ground, where there was nothing to see. "It is moving," she said, and her voice had gone flat and careful. Wren said, "It is under us, and it is coming back round." She was right, and you could see it. There was a ridge in the ash about a foot high, traveling in a slow curve, out and around and back towards where the 6 of us stood in a knot in the middle of the road. 4 of my men had their swords out. Every one of them was standing perfectly still. "Get on the stone, all of you, run." Nobody moved for a heartbeat, and I understood why. They were waiting for the other order. They were waiting for the one where the Lord draws and stands in front, and they all get to be brave and go home with a story. "Now leave the cart, run." So we ran. We ran a mile and a half back down a road with a ridge of moving ash behind us. 2 men carried Quinn between them. I came last, and I did not draw my sword once in the whole of it. The ridge followed us to where the crowned stone starts under the ash. Then it stopped. It sat there, 20 yards out on the soft side of the line. It did not cross. After about a minute it went flat, and there was nothing to see at all. We lost an ox, a cart, 4 sacks, and most of what those 6 men thought of me. Nobody said anything on the ride back. That is the sound a retreat makes. Jory came up level with me about an hour out from the rock. His hands were still shaking. He had ash in his beard. "You were right, you know," he said. "I am aware that I was right." Jory said, "Yes, they are not." He tipped his head back at the 4 men riding behind us in silence. Jory said, "There is a difference, and you are going to have to live in it for a fortnight." I am aware of that as well." He thought about it for a while. Jory said, "Quinn has an arm broken in 2 places, and he still has the arm on him. That is worth something to somebody." He shrugged the shoulder that was not shaking. Jory said, "I shall say so at the fire tonight, and I shall say it very loudly and about 9 times, because that is the one thing in this world I am genuinely good at." And he did. He talked for 3 hours about how their lord counted 6 men and 1 ox and made the sum come out with 6 men in it. It helped, not as much as winning would have helped. The window came back at moonrise on the 2nd day. I was sitting on the east face with my boots off. It opened the way it always does. It was purple, and it was the longest card I had ever been given. Purple epic ashworm, grade C 9 feet, blind, an ash crawler that lived 20 years and ate well. 1 adult under the road, 11 young. It cannot cross laid stone. It hunts what stands still. I read the last line about 40 times. Every carter on the frontier stops his team when the animals balk. That is what you do. That is what any sane man does. They had all been doing the one thing that gets them eaten, and a hand-sized thing that lives under every rock from here to the sea that nobody has ever bothered to look at twice, turns into that if it lives long enough and nothing eats it. Nobody knew, not the Count, not the Carters, not one man in Stonegate. I put my boots back on and went and woke Das and Harl. "I know what it is," I said, "and I know how we kill it. Get up, both of you. I want every plank on this rock counted before it is light." The whole plan came out of one line, and the line was 6 words long. It cannot cross laid stone. Everything we did for the next 2 days came from that. Not from courage and not from me being clever. From 6 words on a purple card and from Ross being dead. I want to explain the second part. Ross was the mason. He was the wide, slow man who put his hand flat on the tower wall like he was greeting a horse, and he was killed at my gate 3 weeks ago, and he had spent 11 days before that teaching 4 Stonegate carters how to lay a course of stone properly, because he could not help himself. Those 4 men were still alive. So on the morning after the card, I stood on the rock and told 90 people we were going to build a road. Jory said, "A road." "A road. We are going to build a road," he said slowly. "Across 200 yards of open ash, in 2 days, in order to fight a worm. In order to fight it standing up." He thought about that for a moment, and then he started rolling his sleeves. Jory said, "Well, when you say it in that voice it sounds almost sensible. Here is what we actually made, because I think the making is the interesting part. We took every plank off the rock, every board of the 800 feet of squared pine I bought in Stonegate for the tower floor. Harl said something about that which I will not write down. We carried them out to where the crown stone ends on the last 2 carts and on our backs, and we laid them, not on the ash, on stone. Ross's 4 went ahead of the planks. They lifted the loose black rock off the bad ground in slabs. There is any amount of it out there. It is the one thing the scar has, and they set it flat and packed it and made a hard bed 12 feet wide. The planks went over the top of that, pegged edge to edge out from the good ground towards the bridge. 240 feet in 2 days. It nearly killed us. It was not a road. It was an island with a handle on it. At the far end of it, out on the open ash, we built the bait. The old cart was still out there on its side where we had left it. We stood it up. We filled 4 hides with ash and sand until they weighed about what an ox weighs. We lashed them to the cart shafts. Then we drove 4 stakes and tied the whole thing down so it could not shift an inch in any wind. A big heavy thing on the soft ground that does not move at all. The most tempting thing in the world to something that hunts what stands still. And we ran 4 ropes back from it to the bridge abutment. That was Harl's part, and it was the good part. The abutments are old crown stone, 12 feet through, sunk in the ground for 200 years. Nothing living is going to move one. He put 4 iron rings into the stone with a hand drill and lead, and he built a windlass on the top out of a cartwheel and an axle, and it took him a day and a night, and he did not sleep at all. "It will hold," he said, and put his thumb on one of the rings to prove it. Harl said, the stone will hold and the iron will hold. I will tell you what will not hold, my lord, and that is your rope. Then we use 4 ropes. Harl said, then we use 6, and I will sleep better. We used 6. He also made the hooks, 4 barbed heads on 8-foot ash poles, each one with a ring in the butt end and a rope through it. Not spears. You do not spear a thing that lives underground. You put a hook in it and you take away the ground. I trained with Noel both nights after the work when I could barely stand up. He would not let me swing at anything. Light it, he said, and do not swing at anything. If you swing at something, I shall go to bed. I lit the blade. Aura came up the steel the way it always does, white along the edge, and I felt the drain start behind my ribs. About 90 seconds of it in the tank and 140 on a good day. Noel said, now make it smaller. It does not go smaller. It is lit or it is not lit. That is what it does. Noel said, that is what you were taught, which is a different sentence altogether. He did not move from where he was sitting. Noel said, make it smaller. The first night I got it down to something like a candle for 4 seconds and then lost it entirely and had to sit down. The second night I held that same low burn for 100 seconds and still had most of the tank. I did not tell him it worked. He looked at my face and laughed at me, which is the same thing. For 8 years, you have been throwing a bucket of water at a fire, he said, and being praised for how far you could throw it. He got up, creaking, and left me sitting there. Noel said, tonight you found the tap. We went out on the 3rd morning, 50 of us. Das laid out the order of it on the good ground before anybody stepped on a plank, and he made every man say his job back to him out loud. I have seen him do that twice. Both times somebody was going to die that day. Ren and 8 bows at the bridge end on the abutment stone. Harl and 6 on the windlass. Jory and 20 on the plank line in 2 ranks facing outward with the hooks. Das in the middle of the planks with nothing in his hands at all, me at the far end where the bait was, and Quinn, who came out with us. His right arm was strapped across his chest and he could not hold anything with it. I told him to stay on the rock and he stood in front of me with his jaw set and said he had been carried home once and would not be carried home twice. I let him come. I put him on the windlass with Harl, which is stone and safe, and about as far from the ash as a man can stand out there. I want that on the record too. I did think about it. I put him in the safest place there was. We set the bait at first light and then we did the hardest part, which was nothing. 50 men stood on planks in the cold for 4 hours and did not talk. It came at about 10 in the morning. There was no warning that anyone saw. The cart simply went over sideways, and one of the ash-filled hides was gone, and then the cart itself started to move, dragging its 4 stakes out of the ground like a man pulling weeds. Das said, hooks, now. 4 men threw, 3 missed, 1 did not. I have never heard a sound like the one it made when the barb went in. It came up out of the ash to about half its length, and I finally saw the thing that had been eating that road for 20 years. 9 feet of gray, no eyes anywhere. A mouth that opened in 4 parts like a hand closing backwards, with rings of teeth going down into the dark of it and every ring turning. It went for the nearest thing that was not moving. That was the abutment, and the abutment is stone, and it hit it and could get no purchase and thrashed. Das said, wind it in all 6 of you and do not stop. Harl's 6 put their backs into the windlass and the rope came in a foot at a time, and the thing came with it up out of the ash onto the black rock, and the moment its body was on stone it could not do anything at all. It could not dig. It could not push. It had no legs. It was 9 feet of muscle designed for one world, lying in another one. Then the young came up. Nobody had thought hard enough about 11. I had read the card and I had thought about the adult, because the adult is 9 feet long, and I am as stupid as anybody. 11 of them came out of the ash on both sides of the plank line at once, dog-sized, fast. Not blind in the same way they came straight at feet. That was the whole fight from then on. 20 men on a 12-foot strip of planks, holding a line facing both ways, in a place where stepping backwards meant stepping onto the ash. Jory was magnificent, and I will say it in this account where he cannot hear me. He stood in the middle of the plank line, and he never once moved his feet off the boards, and he kept 20 frightened men standing on wood by shouting cheerful obscenities at them for 6 minutes. I lit my blade at the low burn. That is the thing I want to put down clearly, because it changed my life more than the worm did. I fought for 6 minutes, not 90 seconds, not 140. 6 minutes at a burn low enough to cut and no lower, and when it was over I had something left in the tank. I killed 4 of the young on the planks. Ren killed 3 from the stone. Das commanded the whole of it from the middle with his sword in its scabbard and never drew it. We lost the plank line once at the north end and got it back. That is where the 2 happened. One was a man of Cade's 14, a young one, and he went off the boards trying to reach a hook that had fallen. He was on the ash for perhaps 2 seconds. That was enough. The other was Quinn. The number 4 rope came off its ring when the adult rolled, and the loose end whipped out over the ash, and the windlass started to run backwards with 6 men hanging off it. Quinn went and got the rope. He had 1 arm. He stepped off the abutment stone onto the ash to reach it, and he got it, and he threw it back up to Harl, and Harl caught it. Then he stood still on the ash for about a second and a half. I saw all of it. I was 40 feet away with a lit sword in my hand, and I could not have got there in 10 times the time. We killed the adult with hammers. I want that in this account as well, because the story that went round Stonegate afterwards had me killing it with a sword alone, which is not what happened. It was pinned on stone by 6 ropes and it could not move, and 11 men beat it to death with the tools we had used to build the road. It took a long time. It was not brave and it was not clean and nobody enjoyed it. I made the last cut. That is all that is true in the story. Afterwards it was very quiet out there. Harl cut the core out from behind the mouth. It was the size of my fist and it was a dark reddish brown and it was warm and it stayed warm. Purple, epic C-grade core. Worth 8 gold at any crown gate. Do not absorb it alone. Harl turned it over twice in his hands and did not give it back to me straight away. I have seen him do that once before with the piece of star metal, on the day we found the seam. There is iron in this. In the core. In the core. He held it up between finger and thumb, against the flat white sky, and turned it. Harl said, 20 years that thing has lived under a road with the same stuff in it that runs through that seam of yours. It has been eating it, my lord. Eating it, and putting it somewhere, and this is where it put it. We carried our 2 dead back along the road we had built. Lam carried the man from Cade's 14 the whole 240 feet on his own and would not let anybody take a corner of him. I walked behind them and I did not know the man's name. I asked. Lam told me. He did not say it unkindly, and that was worse. We buried Quinn and the young man from Cade's 14 under the east face, next to Ross and the other 3. His name was Adder, which was not his name. It was what they called him because he was quick. Lam told me the real one at the graveside, and I have written it in the book, and I am not going to put it here, because he only ever used the other. 6 graves on that side of the rock now. Ren was right about the morning sun. It is the only thing about that face that is any good. Ivy came up to me afterwards with her hands in her apron. 6 days. I know it is 6 days, Ivy. I am not nagging at you, not today of all days. She did not take her hands out of the apron. Ivy said, I am telling you the number because you asked me to tell you the number every morning. She waited until I looked at her. Ivy said, I am not going to be the woman who leaves it out on a burying day and lets you find it out on your own. That is the whole of Ivy in one sentence, and I have never had a better servant in my life. Noel took the core off me that evening. He did not ask. He put out his hand while I was eating and I gave it to him, and he sat and turned it over in the firelight for a while. How did you do the last one? On a rock on my own, at night. And what happened to you? I woke up an hour later with my head on a rolled coat and Jory eating my dinner. Yes, that is what happens with a small one. He held the core out until I took it back off him. Noel said, "Do it that way with this one and you will not wake up at all. It is 2 full grades above the last. It is not the same thing wearing a bigger coat. It is a different animal and it will not be kind to you." So we did it properly, and properly took most of a day. He picked the room. The ground floor of the tower, which has 2/3 of a wall and a canvas roof, because he wanted stone at my back and no wind. He picked the hour. Middle of the morning, after food, and not too much of it. He put a folded coat behind my head before I needed one, which told me more about what was coming than anything he said. And he brought Ren in and would not say why. I do not know the first thing about cores. Noel said, "You have gutted a great many animals, and you know the exact moment one stops breathing." He pointed her at a place on the wall, and she went and sat in it. Noel said, "That is the whole of what I need from you this morning." Then he sat down across from me and talked for 2 hours before he let me touch the thing. I had thought I understood absorption. I had done one and lived. Everything I believed about it was half right, and I have thought a good deal since about which half. What I believed was this: you hold the core. It goes into you. You get bigger. If it is too strong for you, it kills you. What is actually true is that the core is not giving you anything. It is a knot of the same stuff you already have, wound very tight by a thing that spent 20 years winding it. When you take it in, it does not fill you up. It unwinds inside you all at once, and it tries to make you the shape it was. You do not survive it by being strong. You survive it by not letting go of your own shape while it happens. That is why the little ones are safe, and the big ones are not. He said, "A grade F core has nothing whatever to say to you. It is a pebble. This one has 20 years of opinion wound up inside it." I turned it over in my hand and thought about that. And if I lose hold of myself while it is talking, then your heart takes up the worm's rhythm instead of your own, and stops. He said it without any weight on it at all. Noel said, "And in due course the measuring house writes in a ledger that another young man was reckless with a core above his grade." He made me practice the holding for an hour first, the low burn, the tap instead of the bucket, down and down until there was nothing on the blade but a shine you could only see in shadow. Noel said that, exactly that, and no more of it. He tapped the flat of the blade with one rag-wrapped knuckle. Noel said, "Hold that shine. Do not let go of it whatever you feel happening to you." He held up 2 fingers. Noel said, 200. Count it out while the thing unwinds and you will live, and you will keep what it gives you. And if I can only hold it for less than that, then you let go of the core early and you lose most of what is in it, and you walk out of this room. He said it as though he were quoting a price for grain. Noel said, "That is not a failure. That is the trade. Men do not die of being weak at the start. They die of being greedy at the end." I took it at about 11 in the morning. I'm not going to be able to describe the next part well, and I have stopped trying to describe it prettily. It was hot, not on my skin, behind my ribs in the place where the tank is, and it came up so fast that my first thought was that I had made a mistake, and my second thought was that my second thought was too late. Then it started unwinding. The worm did not have anything like a mind. I want to say that because people ask. There was no voice and there was nothing that wanted to talk to me. What there was a way of being, patient, blind, absolutely certain that the world was a dark, warm place with something heavy standing still in it somewhere, and that all you had to do was wait and go up. And it wanted me to be that. For about a minute and a half I could not remember why I would not want to be that. Noel's voice came through it, not loud. "Hold the shine. Do not chase it, hold it. Count with me now, 40, 39, 38. I counted, all the way down, out loud for the first 60 and then not out loud because I could not. At about 11 he put his hand flat on my breastbone and pushed. Hard. Noel said, "Let it go. Now, boy, all of it, and do not be clever." I let go. The window opened before I had my eyes properly open. One letter. Again. I lay on the tower floor with a folded coat under my head and looked at it for a long time, and I did not feel powerful. But I want to be precise about what Dee actually bought me, because in the stories it is always a flash of light and a man standing up different, and it is not. Before, I could light a blade properly for 140 seconds, and then I was a man with a heavy stick. After, with the holding, I can hold the low burn for something over 11 minutes, and I can go to full for about 4, and I can move between them without dropping it. That is it. That is the whole of the gift. It does not sound like much until you have stood on a plank line and watched the sun not move. Ren was crouched by the wall the whole time and had not made a sound. He stopped breathing twice. Noel said, "I know he did. It is perfectly normal, and I would have been worried if he had not." He was gathering the dull core up off the floor as he said it. Noel said, "The second reserve will not fill while the lungs are still working." "The second what?" He was rolling his sleeves down, and he did not look up. Noel said, "A thing you have not got and will not have for years. Do not go chasing it." "Then who has got one?" Noel said, "There are 4 of us left who—" He stopped. He did not cover it. That is what I have thought about since. A liar covers it. He put his sleeve straight, and he finished the sentence in a completely different voice, and the new voice said something about only 4 men in the East being worth the trouble. I was flat on my back with my head full of worm, and I let it go past me. Ren did not. I saw her afterwards when I was sitting up drinking water. She was standing in the doorway of the tower with the canvas moving behind her, and she was looking at the back of Noel's head with an expression I have only ever seen on her when she is working out an animal's weight from its track. She did not say anything to me. Not then, and not for a long time. She picked up her bow and went back to the ditch. I found Noel at the fire that night, and I made the mistake without knowing it was one. I was full of plans. The worm was dead, the road was open, and I had spent the whole afternoon on the tower step with a stick and a patch of ash working out what a road is actually worth. "I need Talbot," I said. "He cannot stand the sight of me, but he wants that road open a great deal more than he dislikes me. If I go into Stonegate myself with the head on a cart and put it down in front of the charter office." Noel had been eating. He stopped. I do not mean he paused. I mean everything about him stopped at once, the way a man stops when he hears a board creak in a house he thought was empty. It lasted less than a second. "Send the boy," he said. "Not you. A lord who carries in his own trophy is bragging, and every man in that square will know it. A lord who sends a 14-year-old up the road with a cart is making the town a present." "That is good advice." Noel said, "It is. Take it and stop looking at me." "You have met him." Noel said, "Everybody in that town has met him. He reads the law off his own steps twice a year." He set his bowl down on the stone and got up, and his knees went off like green sticks. Noel said, "You are burning a fire in a country with no wood in it. Bank it, or you will be cold at 4 in the morning and blaming the weather." Then he went to bed, which he had never once done before I finished talking. So I sent Pip and Jory to Stonegate with the head of the thing on a cart. 9 feet of it would not fit, so we took the front 4, which is the end with the mouth on it, and we packed it in ash and salt. I sent one more thing with them, and it was the only order I gave that whole week that I am still pleased with. I sent the 4 men who had run away with me. The 6 who had been out on the road the day we lost the ox and the cart, and Quinn nearly went with them. I sent them to stand next to the head in a market square and be asked questions. They came back different men. You cannot buy that. Jory told me afterwards that the square was full inside 20 minutes, and that a carter had cried, and that an old woman had put her hand into the mouth of it to see if the teeth turned, and that the whole of Stonegate now knew the road east was clear, which was true. It was also, as it turned out, a fortnight too early, because a road being clear is not the same thing as a road being worth using. And there was a man in that market square with a southern accent, listening to my 6 men very carefully, who was 2 months into a job of work for Lady Maeve. Jory came back from Stonegate with 3 carts of grain, and I want to be clear that this did not solve anything. It was the same woman who had told me no. The one with the oil and the dried fish, who would have sold me anything I liked except delivery. She sent a note with it, 4 words: "The road is clear." 3 carts is 20 days of food for 91 people, and I had 6. So it was the difference between a settlement and a burial party, and I am not going to pretend I was calm when I saw them coming up the ash. But she sent it once. She sent it because a boy stood in a market square next to a mouth with rings of teeth in it, and a carter cried, "That is not a supply. That is a mood." In 4 weeks the mood would go, and the road would still be 2 days of empty gray country with no water on it and a 40-foot hole in the middle, and she would go back to no. Das said it better than I did on the step while we watched the carts come up the ramp. "You have not opened a road, my lord. You have taken away one of the reasons not to use it. And there are others. There are 3 others, and I can give you all 3 before those carts are unloaded." He held up a hand and did not bother counting on it. Das said, "There is no water on that road. There is no bridge across the middle of it. And once the sun goes down, no man out there has the first idea where he is." So we went back out and spent 9 days fixing all 3, and it is the best work I have ever been part of. We took up the plank road. That felt strange. 50 men had nearly killed themselves laying it. 9 days later, we lifted every board and stacked it back on the carts. The thing it was built to stop was dead. The wood was worth more somewhere else. Ross's 4 went with us to do the stone. I have not stopped thinking about that either. A man who has been dead a month was still telling 4 Stonegate carters how to set a course through their hands because he could not help teaching. The bridge first. The gap is 38 feet, not 40, which matters when you are counting timber. Both abutments are sound. There is no bridge because the deck rotted out and nobody would pay for another one, and it is easier to write in a ledger that a road is impassable than to buy oak. We built it in 5 days out of the plank road, the last of the Stonegate oak, and 11 trees Wren found 40 miles north in a fold of dead ground where things still grow. Harl made the iron. 206 bolts, cut and headed by hand, in 4 days. It will not last 100 years. It will carry a loaded cart and 2 oxen, and it is the only way across that channel for 11 miles in either direction, and I have the charter that says the ground on both sides of it is mine. Then the water. The channel under the bridge has been dry for 300 years. That is what everybody in Stonegate knows about it, and it is why nobody ever camped there. I stood in the bottom of it with a stick and thought about the cistern at Blackstone, which was under my feet for 3 weeks while I looked at a dry rock. A channel is a dry river. A river does not stop being a river because you cannot see it. It goes down. We dug for 2 days and got wet sand at 9 feet and water at 14. I have never heard men make a noise like the one they made when the first bucket came up brown. Jory took his boots off and stood in it. Then we walled it. Not a fort. A yard. Chest-high dry stone, 40 feet by 60 on the flat above the channel on the east side, with 1 gate, a stone trough, a fire pit, and a shelter roof of the same pine. Room for 6 carts and their teams inside the wall with water, at the exact point where a man leaving Stonegate at dawn runs out of daylight. We put up cairns every half-mile the whole way, both directions, out of loose black rock chest high, so that a man in the dark can walk from one to the next and know he is on the road. 94 cairns. Pip counted them. Pip counted everything that week. On the 9th day, with the water yard half built, Count Talbot rode out from Stonegate with 11 men and a clerk. He had not sent word. He got down off his horse in the middle of my building site and walked the whole of it before he spoke to me. The bridge, the abutments, the trough, the wall, the gate. He put his boot on the deck and bounced twice. "Who did your stone?" I told him. 4 of his own carters, taught by a mason of mine who died last month. He grunted at that and said nothing else about it. Then he told his clerk to read, and the clerk read out a section of the Crown Road law in a flat voice, and I stood there and listened to my whole plan being taken away from me in about 40 seconds. No man may levy a toll, fee, duty, or charge upon a crown road. Not a lord, not a count, not a duke. The penalty is the loss of the charter. You were going to charge them, he said when the clerk had finished. I was. Talbot said, and now you have heard it read, you understand that you cannot. No, my lord, I cannot. He was not enjoying it. That is the thing about Talbot that took me a long time to understand. He was not there to beat me. He had ridden 2 days to tell me to my face rather than let me build the thing and then take my charter off me for it, which he would have done without blinking. I want to be plain with you, because you have earned that much, he said. I am not offering you a way round it. There is no way round it. That road has been Crown Road since before your family had a name to sign. And that is when I heard it, that road. I asked him for the clerk's copy and I read the section myself twice, standing on my own bridge. Then I asked one question. Is the bridge the road? Nobody said anything at all. There has been no bridge in this place for 300 years. The Crown did not build this one. The Crown has never paid a copper to keep it up. Nobody stopped me, so I went on. I built it 9 days ago, out of my own timber, on ground that is written on my charter. If I take an axe to it this afternoon, there is no law in Caldon with a word to say to me about it. The clerk started to say something. Talbot lifted one finger and he stopped. The same is true of the water. That well is 14 feet deep and 9 days old. There was no water anywhere on this road a fortnight ago. There is water now because I put men in a hole and dug for it. The road is the Crown's. The road is free. I would not take a copper for it. I pointed down into the channel. Any man may walk it end to end. He can go down there and up the other side, the way carts have done for 300 years. That is why no carts do. Then I put my hand on the rail of my own bridge. Or he can cross this and drink my water. Those are mine. Those are not free. Talbot looked at me for a very long moment. Then he did something I did not expect. He laughed. One breath of it out of his nose with no pleasure in it whatsoever. Read it again, he said to the clerk, without looking away from me. Talbot said slowly and all of it. The clerk read it again. Everybody stood there in the wind and listened to the words road, way, and thoroughfare, and not once the word bridge. It is not in it, my lord, the clerk said, and he sounded genuinely startled. The word is simply not in the section. Talbot said no, it is not. Talbot began pulling his gloves on, one finger at a time. And it is not in it because, for 200 years, nobody has been mad enough to build one out here at his own expense, so no clerk in the capital ever had to think about it. He got up on his horse. Talbot said, I rode out here to stop you and I have failed, and I am not angry about it. He gathered his reins in one hand. Talbot said, I have wanted that road working for 9 years. If a bastard boy with a charter is what it takes, then I will take a bastard boy with a charter. Thank you, my lord. Talbot said, do not thank me, hear the rest of it. He turned the horse until he was looking down at me square. Talbot said, charge what you like, but every man who pays you will hate you a little for it, and hate compounds like a debt at a bad rate. What you decide to do about that is the only interesting question anybody will ask you this year. I thought about that for the rest of the afternoon, and then I did the thing I am proudest of in this entire account, and it cost nothing. I had Harl cut a board and Pip write on it in whitewash. We nailed it inside the gate of the water yard, where every man who came in would have to read it while his oxen drank. It said, the bridge and the water at the halfway yard crossing the bridge, 1 copper a wheel and 1 copper a beast. Water, free for any man, woman, or child always. Water for beasts, 1 copper a head. A night inside the wall, 2 copper a cart. Nobody pays more, nobody pays less. Nobody pays nothing. This is the price for the count, for a carter and for me. Written the 9th day. It will not change without a new board. Bram, Lord of Blackstone, I have been asked since whether that was clever. It was not clever. Clever would have been charging the rich more, which is what everybody does, and which is why every road in this kingdom has men on it who feel robbed. It was arithmetic again. A man does not mind paying. A man minds finding out what the man in front of him paid. The first coin came in 2 days later before the yard was even finished. A carter out of Stonegate with 1 cart, 4 barrels of salt fish and a boy. He had heard in the Fox and Grain that there was water at the bridge. He had come out to find whether it was a lie. He read the board twice. Then he read it out loud to the boy because the boy could not read. 4 wheels and 2 beasts. 6 copper for the crossing, 2 for the beasts to drink, 2 for the night inside the wall, 10 copper. A day's labor is 15. He put it in my hand himself, and I gave him a chip of slate with the date scratched on it because I had not thought of anything better yet. Then I paid the same, in front of him. 6 copper out of my own purse for my own cart on my own bridge into the same box. Pip wrote both of us in the book on the same line. The carter watched me do it. You did not have to do that, my lord. There is a board on the gate. Aye, you wrote it. That is rather the point of it. He thought about it the whole time his oxen were drinking. When he left in the morning, he stopped at the gate. There is 9 of us drink at the Fox and Grain of a Sunday, he said, with one hand on the ox's head. Carter said, I will tell them about the water. I will not say a word about you, mind. Only the water and the wall. The water and the wall will do. 10 copper. I have taken more money than that since. I have taken a great deal more. I have never once been happier about a sum than I was about that one, sitting in a half-built yard in the dark with a chip of slate in a box. 4 nights later, a man I trusted opened my gate. The window gave me alarm at 10:30 at night, and I was 90 seconds too late. I have gone back over those 2 days a great many times. I want to set out what actually happened in order, because the story that gets told is that I was betrayed, and that is not what happened. I was not betrayed. I was outbid by a professional during a fortnight when I had chosen to be blind. Here is what I know now. Kesk came out of the south, 2 months in the country. He had been in Stonegate the whole time, drinking in the Blue Ox, buying nothing, saying he was a wool factor. He was in the market square the day my 6 men stood next to the Worm's Head. He listened to all of it. He asked no questions at all, which is the professional part. Then he came out to my rock with the 4th party of new arrivals, stayed 1 night inside my ditch as a guest, ate my food, and left in the morning. That was one of the 2 days. I looked straight at him across a fire. If the window had been working, it would have opened and it would have told me what he was. It was 200 miles under a road digging up a worm. I paid for it 9 nights later. Lam was the one he bought, and I have thought hard about the word bought. It was not only money, though there was money. Kesk gave him 11 gold, which is more than Lam would earn in 5 years, and he did not have to give him all of it at once. What Kesk actually did was listen to him for 3 hours. He asked Lam about the man who died at the bridge. He asked him what the boy's name was. He let Lam tell the whole of it, and then he said the true thing, which is that Lam's lord had stood at the graveside and had not known. That is the part I did to myself. I will not pretend Lam had no case. He had a case. He had come to that rock with Cade, been beaten, been fed, been paid, and then had watched a friend of his die on a plank 240 feet out on the ash, in a plan I made, for a road I was going to charge money to cross. 12 of the 14 would have told Kesk to go and drown himself. 2 thought about it. 1 did it. That is not 14 traitors. That is 1 man and 1 lord who was looking the other way. The card came at 10:30. I was walking back from the ditch with a lamp. Lam passed me going the other way with a water yoke on his shoulders, and he said good night to me, and he said it perfectly normally. The window opened. Blue, standard, this man has 11 gold buried under the forge floor. He is going to the gate. I want to describe the next 90 seconds honestly because I did not do anything clever in them. I did not shout an order. I did not put a plan together. I turned round on the path with a lamp in my hand and ran after a man carrying 2 buckets of water, and I got about 40 yards. Then I heard the bar come off the gate. Here is what saved Blackstone, and it is not me, and it is not Das. It was a badly cut joint. The gate is oak, hung on the 2 standing stubs of the old tower wall. Ross cut the frame for it, and Ross was killed before he finished, and I cut the last of it myself with his tools on the afternoon we buried him. I am not a carpenter. The bottom rail is a 1/4 inch proud on the swing side. It has caught on the stone sill since the day we hung it, and Harl has offered to plane it 4 times, and I have said no every time, for a reason I have never told anybody. Lam got the bar off and got the gate open about 18 inches, and then it jammed on the sill exactly the way it always jams, and he had to lift it. He was one man. It is a very heavy gate. It took him perhaps 30 seconds. 30 seconds is the ditch. 30 seconds is Ren getting to the top of the tower drum with her bow. 30 seconds is Das out of his blanket with his boots already on, because Das has slept in his boots since he was 19. 30 seconds is the difference between a raid and a massacre. They came in through the gap in single file because they had no other choice, and the first 4 of them died in the gateway. Then it was a fight in a camp in the dark, which is the worst thing I know. I want people to understand what that is. It is not a battle. There is no line. There are 90-odd people asleep on the ground in canvas and blankets between you and the enemy, and half of them are standing up in the dark not knowing which way to run, and some of them are children. You cannot swing. That is the thing nobody tells you. There is a man in front of you with a sword, and there is a woman with a baby behind him, and you cannot swing. I lit at the low burn, and I kept it low the whole night, and it is the only reason I lasted. Das got 20 people out of the middle and up onto the tower step and made a line there, and he shouted the same 4 words over and over for 4 minutes until every one of them was behind it. Jory held the north side on his own for a while. He had come out of his blanket with no shirt on, and he fought the whole of it barefoot, and he took a cut down the outside of his left arm that he will have for the rest of his life. Harl killed 2 men with a hammer in the forge and would not talk about it afterwards. Ren killed 4 from the tower drum in the dark. In the dark. I have asked her how, and she says the fires, and I do not believe her. Pip was where he should not have been. I had told him one thing. If anything ever happens, you go to the cistern chamber with Ivy and the children, and you pull the boards over and you stay there. He went. That is the thing. He went, he got 11 children and 2 women down the steps. He pulled the boards over. And then he came back out. I found him at the mouth of the cistern chamber with the mattock he took at the ford, standing in the dark on the top step in front of the boards, because a man had come round the corner of the tower and was walking towards them. He was 14 years old, and he did not run, and he did not shout for me. I got there before the man did, 2 feet before. I do not think about that if I can help it. Then it was Kesk in the middle of my camp standing still. He was about 35, southern, neat dark beard, plain harness, a good sword, and no rings on his fingers. He was not shouting, and he was not fighting. He was standing beside the water but watching it go wrong, counting exactly the way Das counts. He had brought 11 men. 9 were down. The gate was still jammed on the sill. He looked at me across 40 feet of firelight, and he did the arithmetic in front of me, and he was so calm about it that I nearly laughed. Then Das drew. He had commanded the whole night without touching his sword. 20 feet from Kesk, he took it out, and every man near enough to hear it turned round. "That one is mine, my lord." "No." He walked into my camp as a guest. He ate at that fire, and tonight he brought 11 swords in over children. He had not raised his voice at all, which is how I knew. Das said, "Give him to me." "Put it away, Das." He did not put it away for a long moment. That is the only time in 2 years I have watched that man think about not obeying me. I let Kesk walk out. He took his 2 living men, and he went out through my jammed gate at a walk, not a run, and nobody put an arrow in his back, and I have been asked about that decision by nearly everybody who was standing there. The reason is one line, and I gave it to Das on the step that night. I need her told exactly what happened on this rock tonight. I said, by the one man in the world she will believe. If I kill Kesk, Lady Maeve hears that her hired man went east and never came back, which tells her nothing and which means she sends two next time and better ones. If Kesk walks home, he tells her the truth. He is professional. He will not dress it up. He will tell her that the ditch worked and the gate held on a bad joint and a 14-year-old boy stood in front of a hole with a mattock, and 11 paid swords went in and 3 came out. That is worth more to me than his body. That buys me a year. We lost 2 that night, and there were 4 graves at the east face by morning, because 2 of the new families lost a man each, and I am counting them the same as mine. 9 of Kesk's dead went in a pit on the far side of the ash, and I read nothing over them. Then there was Lam. He did not run. That is the part that has stayed with me. He could have gone out through the gate with Kesk, and nobody would have stopped him in the dark. They found him sitting on the ground by the gate he had opened, with his back against the post, doing nothing at all. I did it in the morning, in front of everybody, because of the board at the water yard. I had written on that board that the price is the same for the count, for a carter, and for me. 11 days later, I was standing on a rock with a man in front of me who had opened a gate on 90 sleeping people, and there is only one price for that. And if I had found a reason to make it a different price for a man I liked, then the board is just paint. I asked him if he wanted to say anything. Lam said say his name. He did not say it as a request, and he did not say it as a curse. He said it the way a man reads out the one line of an account that has been wrong for a month. So I said it, out loud in front of 130 people, and then I said the other one as well, the one they had actually called him by. Lam nodded slowly, twice, and looked at the ground. That is all right then. We used the dead tree. It is the only thing on that rock tall enough, and it has been standing there since before the scar was the scar. I did it myself. Das offered. I would not let him. It is the worst thing I have ever done, and I have never once thought I was wrong to do it, and I have found that those 2 facts live in a man at the same time without any trouble at all. Afterwards I went and sat behind the tower where nobody could see me, the way I always do, and Ivy came round the corner with a bowl in her hands. She did not say anything about any of it. Eat that. I am not hungry, Ivy. No, I did not imagine you were. Eat it anyway. She put the bowl into my hands and folded my fingers round it, as though I were 6 years old. Ivy said, you are the worst-fed man on this rock, and you have been since the day you walked up that ramp. Every soul here knows it, whether they say so or not. She straightened up and looked out at the camp. Ivy said, that is why they stopped where they were last night, my lord, instead of going out through that gate behind him. Then she went back to her fire. Harl planed the bottom rail of the gate flat that afternoon without asking me and hung it properly on new pins. I let him. I asked him first to keep the old rail, and it is in the tower now, on 2 pegs on the wall where I can see it from the table. Nobody who comes into that room ever asks about it. It is a piece of oak with a scorch mark and a 1/4 inch of bad cutting on one edge. It is the most expensive thing I own. The caravan came up the ash road 6 days later, and I saw it from the tower an hour before it arrived. 9 carts, 4 of them with a canvas tilt, 5 of them open, 22 oxen, a dozen people walking beside the wheels who were not carters, which I did not understand until they got close enough to see the bundles on their backs. Pip got to me first, because Pip always gets there first. 9 of them, 9. I can count, Pip. You cannot count what is inside them, though, can you? He was going up and down on his toes, and could not make himself stop. Pip said, I got a look at the book down the yard before they hitched up. Grain, salt, oil, 2 whole carts of seed corn, and a plow. A plow? Pip said, a plow, my lord. Nobody sends a plow to a camp. You send a plow to a place that is going to be there next year. I want to be exact about why they came, because it was not because of me and it was not because of the worm. It was the water. The head in the market square opened the road in people's mouths. That lasted about a fortnight, and I have already written what I think a mood is worth. What actually moved 9 carts was one carter with 4 barrels of salt fish. He went home and told 9 men in the Fox and Grain what he had seen. A wall at the bridge, water in a stone trough, a board on the gate with the price on it. A road is not a thing you clear. A road is a thing men will use when they know what it costs and where they will sleep. We took the toll at the bridge in public at the published price. Pip sat on a barrel with the book on his knees and Wren stood behind him, and I made myself stay 20 feet away and not touch any of it. 36 wheels. 22 beasts. 9 carts overnight inside the wall. 2 silver and 24 copper out of 9 purses into 1 box with every line written down in a hand. A 14-year-old had been practicing for 4 weeks because he did not want to be ashamed of it. The master carter read the board twice before he paid, the way they all do now. Same price for the count, it says here. Same price for the count. He will not care for that. He said it the way a man says a thing he has enjoyed saying. Carter said not him. He has already read it. He rode out here with 11 men and a clerk, and he stood where you are standing and read every line of it, and then he went home. The man laughed and put his 10 copper in the box, and that was the whole of it. No argument, no pleading, no man riding away feeling robbed. 2 silver and 24 copper is not money. A hired sword costs 3 silver a month. I had just taken less than one man's wages, but it came from strangers at a price on a board for a thing we made out of nothing in 9 days. Everything I have built since is that sum with more noughts on it. Jory did not agree, and said so at volume, standing in the water yard with his arm in a sling. 2 silver. He said it to the sky rather than to me. Jory said we killed a 9-foot worm. We buried 4 of our own. We fought a war in our nightshirts against 11 paid swords, and I did the whole of it with no boots on. And the answer at the end of all that is 2 silver. 2 silver and 24 copper. Jory said, oh, well then, say no more about it. Wren said it is 9 carts. Wren said, without looking up from the trough. Last month it was none. The month before that it was none. Count that instead. Jory opened his mouth and shut it again, which happens perhaps twice a year. That is the difference between the two of them. Jory counts what a thing is. Wren counts which way it is going. The 12 walking beside the carts were what mattered more. 4 families and 2 single men out of Stonegate and the villages west of it. They had heard 2 things about the scar, that there was a lord out here who fed his people before he fed himself, and that he had killed the thing under the road. One of those is true, and I did not kill it on my own. I stood at the gate and took their names myself. That is a thing I have done for every single person who has ever come up that ramp, and I will do it until I cannot hold a pen. One of them was a woman of about 50 with a barrow full of nothing, who looked at my ditch and my bank and my gate and said one sentence to me. They say up the road that you hanged a man of your own for opening that gate. She did not ask it kindly, and she did not ask it unkindly. Woman said, is that true, or is it the sort of thing they say? It is true, I did it myself. Right. She said and picked her barrow up and pushed it on up the ramp. That was the whole reason she had come. I do not entirely like that. I have written it down anyway. By nightfall we were 139 people, and Ivy had fed every one of them, and there was food left in the pot. I went and looked at the store myself, late, with a lamp, the way I used to check a horse I had already checked. 11 sacks had become 61. 4 barrels of salt pork had become 19. There was oil and beans, and 2 carts of seed under canvas with a plow standing beside them in the dark. I stood in a stone store on a black rock and counted a wall of sacks by lamplight, and it is the only time in my life I have cried about barley. The window gave me the whole board that evening. I was standing on the tower step with the coin box under my arm and the light going orange off the west face, and it opened wider than I have ever seen it open. The Count Blackstone people 91 to 139 food secure to the first frost water good, 2 sources walls ditch, bank, gate iron 1 seam, unworked coin rising settlement camp. 6 graves at the east face, a worm's head in a market square, a bridge, a well 94 cairns and 139 people. Camp. I stood there and laughed out loud on my own, which frightened a woman carrying a bucket. Because underneath it there was one more line, and it was the first time the window had ever told me what came next. Outpost requires 200 people, a standing wall, a granary, 200 people, a standing wall, a granary. I could taste all 3 of them. 3 things happened in the last 2 days of that month, and I did not understand any of them properly at the time. The first was a rider seen on the West Road. One of the cairn parties saw him at dusk, 4 miles out, going away from us and not hurrying. Southern harness, dark beard, 2 men with him. Kesk went home the long way and took his time about it, and I want to believe that was because I let him and he knew it. It may only be that a professional does not gallop. The second came up the ramp on the morning of the last day, on a horse that had been ridden much too hard. A boy of about 17 in Owen's colors who had been in the saddle for 11 hours and could barely get down. He gave me a letter. It was 2 sentences long and it was not in Owen's hand. I have the paper still. It says, "Our east ditch has failed and the water with it. My brother will not write this letter, so I have. Sira. I have read a great many letters since, and I have never had one that cost the writer more. She is the woman who stood in the doorway of a survey tent in Stonegate 3 months ago and watched me count out coin for a smith's debt, and told her brother in front of me that I was probably a fool. She has a claim 11 miles east of mine with a river on it, which is the best ground any of us drew. And a river claim with a failed ditch in autumn is a claim with nothing on it by spring. I did not answer it that night. I want that written down as well, because I have been given credit since for a decisiveness I did not have. I sat with it for 4 hours. The third thing was Noel. He came and stood beside me at the bridge on the last evening while I was counting the box out onto a plank with Pip. 16 silver and 11 copper for the month. Not 1 coin of it from my father or from a duchess or from anybody's charity. I was enjoying myself. I know exactly how that sounds. Noel watched the whole count without saying anything. Then he asked one question, and it was not about money. "How far east does that charter of yours run?" 9 miles. Then Owen's ground. Then 30-odd miles that nobody has ever bothered to claim. And past the nothing. The hollow. He did not answer that for a while. He nodded slowly, looking east, at 40 miles of gray country going dark. "Get your 200 people," he said. "Get your wall, get your granary." He was still looking east. Noel said, "Then we will talk about what I want for the teaching. You said you would tell me when I could afford it." Noel said, "I did. You cannot afford it yet." He turned round and went back up the road towards the yard. He said the rest of it over his shoulder. Noel said, "But I have been waiting 18 years. And this month, for the first time, I have started counting again." I stood on my bridge with 16 silver on a plank and watched an old man walk away in the dark. Behind me, Pip was writing the last line in the book. 11 miles east, a woman who thought I was a fool was sitting up waiting for an answer, and I already knew what I was going to say.